up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Ryan here, and we're going to be doing coilovers on a Mark III finally. I noticed a couple of months back that someone had asked me about doing a coilover video for Mark IIIs, and you're in luck. I'm finally around to getting to it. I'm going to let you know ahead of time, I bought $200 coilovers off Amazon. eBay. So, understand, if you spend $200 on coilovers, you're probably not going to like them. If you're spending $200 on coilovers and you think you're getting a good deal, you're probably not going to like them. I bought $200 coilovers because I don't want to spend crazy amounts of money on suspension for a car that I'm going to daily drive. As long as they're stiff and I don't have to worry about rubbing issues and it's not going to boat up and down from blown shock stuff, I'm fine. So for me, $200 shocks and coils, that's a perfect thing for me. However, I will admit, I'm also aware that I'm spending $200 on these coils. I'm not expecting KW product, quality product out of a $200 Amazon buyer. Now, these specific coils, I'm actually very unhappy with. There was a little bit of a snafu with it where I got them, and the rubber bushings that keep the springs from sliding back and forth and separating when you're going across the ground, they're not solid pieces. They're just a bunch of rubber pieces stuck together. And as I was pulling them out of the box, I noticed like one of the springs was cocked and sideways from the other one. And I found that to be really strange right out the gate. I tried to do an unboxing video and it didn't work. But anyway, beware. Check all your hardware. Check how your coils are assembled. Make sure that it's safe. The coils I bought, they might fly in other places where people don't care and certain things aren't a problem, but like here where I have to worry about that spring popping up, kicking out, and then rubbing on my tire and causing me a flat or causing me a blowout or causing an accident or even just stranding me somewhere while I change to a spare tire, I don't really care. The problem is there should not be a concern at any point of my spring not staying in line with the other spring and them separating and doing whatever they want to do. That shouldn't be a problem. Shouldn't be a thing. But for this case, it was, and thankfully I had some of those plastic rings where they have the flange on both sides to keep it in line. So for me, worked out fine. Was a little bit of a pain in the ass when I realized it, but honestly it was just an extra step of taking everything apart and resituating the springs, and I managed to make that work. The second thing that bothered me about these coilovers was on the rear shocks. I don't know where they get their nuts from for the hardware, but the problem I had was that as soon as you stick the nut onto the center shaft and try to tighten it, it immediately bit in like it was about to cross thread. And I went backwards a bunch to make sure that I had clicked back far enough to make sure that it dropped into the threads like it was supposed to. Still wouldn't go on, so I didn't force it. I recommend you not forcing it. If you force it and it does cross thread, well, with the way these shocks work and the fact that you have to hold on to the top end with a wrench once you get down a certain point, you really don't want to have that happen because then you're ruining the shock by destroying the threads. You can't just weld this back up and build it back up and then try retapping it or something. Once you ruin these threads, they are pretty much done. If it holds the first time, don't ever take it apart. And if you do take it apart with the mindset that you're going to have to replace it, because taking it apart after you've damaged the threads is going to completely wipe what's left of it, and there will be no way to fasten anything down onto it again. You'll basically just keep spinning in circles forever, and it'll never tighten. And that's a problem because if you hit a hard enough bump, and that's not tight enough, and it just shucks that thing right on off and spits all the bushings out, well, now you've got a shock flopping around in there, and that's a problem. So be very careful, pay good attention to all the hardware, make sure that you're not going to make a mistake. It pays to be patient and really inspect things. And I don't mean take out a magnifying glass, but I mean just give it a good, hold it in your hand, flip it around, spin it, twist it, hold it up in the light. Do what you got to do to ensure that the product you bought is not going to damage your investment. That's the idea. I'm being cheap, but I'm being cheap conscious so that I know if something goes wrong or if I hadn't paid attention, the springs shifted loose and popped a tire, I could have been in real trouble. So that's that with the coilover. So we're past that as far as the quality goes. Just be mindful of what you're doing. Another thing is, if you're coming away from factory suspension, my best recommendation to you is take your car to a professional if this isn't something you've done before. if you are concerned that you're going to hurt yourself, chances are good that you will hurt yourself. So when dealing with the kind of pressures and forces that these factory springs are put under, just having the shock bolted together, you try to cut that shit loose. If you don't have a spring compressor or some kind of real system or tool in place to protect you or prevent injury at the minimum, because sometimes you can't, in the real world, shit happens and you have to react and do what you've got to do on the spot to make shit work. So, you know, if it's not something you've done before and you're not comfortable with messing with suspension components, don't start this job. Take it to a shop, pay them a few $100s. Hopefully they won't tear you up too bad. And then while you're there, you can get an alignment, which that's another thing. If you are messing with your suspension at all, if you're changing any settings on your suspension whatsoever, you are going to need an alignment. Especially if you're replacing your front coils. Your front shocks on a Volkswagen Mark III and also a Mark II, that's where the camber adjustments are. They are at that bottom joint where the knuckle, where the wheel, that whole thing goes into the bottom of the shock and bolts together. That has wiggle room where things can go different ways and you can get different adjustments out of it. So you want to be really careful and make sure that you get it as close to what it came apart as when you started. If you don't do that, and then you go riding around not going to get an alignment, you're eventually going to wear your tires out, and you're going to pop one, and you're going to be stranded somewhere. And it's going to cost you money, and it's not worth it. If you're going for camber, you know what you're doing. I'm not talking to you guys. I like camber on the right application in the right car too, so I'm not here to judge anybody about who's, you know, cambering the shit out of their car. Is there anything else that we're missing? I can't really think of anything else that we're missing. Just be diligent, man. Pay attention to what you're doing, you know. This channel is to help people start into cars. This channel is not a tutorial on what to do every time. I'm here to give you a general guideline of what it's going to take to do some of these jobs. Not every job I do is going to be the same. I've already got coilovers on Jenny, but the shocks have blown out on the front. So here I am doing it again. But the thing about that is, I set my coils up on the last setup differently from how they're going back in, which means it's easier for me to get it apart. I don't have any pressures built up in my suspension. I don't have any weight on my wheels. I don't have anything like that going on. So for me, it's going to be boom, 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 and then the shock's going to fall away. I'm going to put the new one in and tighten it all back up, and I'm going to be done. These two coils that I'm going to show you are probably some of the easiest suspension components I've ever changed in my experience on mechanicking. There are far more complicated cars out there. Hondas, believe it or not, they're not any more complicated, but they're just a bit more of a pain in the ass with that like horseshoe thing that goes on the control arm at the bottom. Most Hondas, the axle goes through that, and sometimes it's a real bitch to try and get that whole thing to clear itself, so you end up on a Honda pulling the axles and doing all kinds of... Thankfully, Volkswagens, you don't have to do anything extra. You just unbolt the shocks, and then you move on from there. So we're going to go ahead and flip from here in the barn right now, and we're going to go outside, and I'm going to start showing you some coilover work. Okay, now we're back at the car. As you can see, I've already pulled this one loose. And we did that for a reason. So that way, when we loosen up this other side, the whole axle will drop down and out and clear the coils. So if you, sir, want to go ahead and put the squeezy on her, you want to take this off the top. On my car, it's a 16 millimeter or a 5/8 inch socket. And it's not terribly hard to get to. It's right there up top. Oh, poo. Zoom attack. What are you doing?
The damn bolt's stuck in the hole.
We'll get the second one anyway. It'll go. Woo.
That was bigger.
Is it?
Yeah.
Shouldn't be.
The socket's not going on it.
Which one's that one? That's my 3/4. 3/4 not good enough. We need a 11/16 or 17 millimeter. So as everybody on the internet can see, shit always is never right.
It's stuck.
It's because you put the hole on the detent, didn't you? And then you'll see this falls down, right? Okay, so I think now we need the 18, which I used this right here. But real quick, since I already pulled this side out and can show it to you, you're gonna see get all my bushes and stuff lined back up. Okay. So you're gonna want to go up into that hole right there, and then you're gonna want to slide the bottom of the coil down into that spot in the axle. You'll see when you took it apart, that's how it came apart. So you're just gonna want to go top side first, slide around, get up in there, and then push the axle down, and bam! Then I can take this here bolt and stick it back through, and then done. Just like that. It's up in the hole, the bushing's in there already. I got it down inside of there, and then you just need to tighten it up. Now if you're lucky, on the inside of the shock, no, take that center nut off. If you're,
I didn't put it on.
No? Oh. If you'll notice, this little tab right here, that is a self-catching nut on the inside of that. Some of these don't have that. Some of them have broken. So if you have a problem with the nut on the inside spinning, you're gonna have to put a wrench in this hole right here where this goes into. And with the caliper there, it's a real pain in the balls. So be ready for that. But basically, no, not yet. Basically, that's the rear. You want to disconnect both sides first so that the axle will drop, and then you can remove the coils from the axle. Ideally, because I still have to put this other side together, I won't be able to completely show you how to get it back up in the car, but what you do is once you get the other coil on the other side and everything's about lined up where it needs to be, you then just take a floor jack underneath of the axle and raise it up slowly until both of the struts clear up inside of the car to get the nuts and bushings on it. So we'll be back in a little bit when it's time for us to jack it up so that I can kind of show you what it is. So I'm just here for a second. I'm not actually going to show you how to get the back end because mine turned out really ugly because I bought those $200 coilovers I've been warning you about since the beginning of the video. I can't mount my upper bushes, so I'll walk over here real quick and show you. Some bullshit. Okay. So if you look right down in here, there's supposed to be a rubber piece. Oh, where'd it go? I had it in there, right there. So this rubber piece right here is supposed to go in here like that and sit down, and then that washer that's down in there, that conjunction function shit right there, is supposed to basically sandwich this bushing down under there somewhere. But if you notice, even with me already tightening the piss out of this, I can't get the shaft out. So again, another problem for $200 coilovers. Be very aware that you might have to like really rig the shit out of some stuff to make it work. I was gonna be emailing them, and I might actually ask for a partial refund because this has actually turned into a real big fucking aggravation. But back to the rest of the video. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the front. All right, everybody. So we're out here at the car now. Time to swap out this front one. I'm gonna let you know now, I went ahead and took the other side loose to just kind of make this a little bit easier for myself. These cars are equipped with sway bars. Largely, like I said, with the back, you want to undo both of them at the same time so that the axle will fall. The sway bar up front will actually keep one side higher than the other, and it'll be a little bit more of a fight to get it to drop down and out. I got that side out, but here we are anyway. So this is an original factory nut. If I'm not mistaken, it's a 7/8. I've already loosened it. I'm gonna go ahead and just take that off. I figured I wouldn't This could be a fight. These are aftermarket coilovers, so this center shaft here may be different from the OEM stuff you've got. This is a 7mm for me. Could be a 6 for you. It could be a 5 if you've got something even different, even more different. I don't know. But that's a 7/8. I forget what that equivalates to. So right now, I could potentially officially take the strut out if I release the 2 bottom bolts. But I'm actually going to release this nut here while everything's up in here and the jack is holding the hub up inside. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to use the weight of the car basically to hold the center shaft while I try to get this off. So that way I don't have to do the wrench and Allen socket or Allen wrench to make that whole thing work. If you keep a little bit of tension on it and use the weight of the car to get stuff done, it works out a little easier. Oh, what the hell was I looking for? Looking for the socket. And I'm losing my mind. It's still on the gun. I think it's the same size. Yeah, look. There we go. All right, so now that that's off, the top is done. However, I'm gonna leave most of the tension on it. I'm just gonna drop it down. See that starting to sink? I'm gonna come down until this just barely starts like that. So now, if you've done this and you have OEM springs on your car, once you see this strut bushing go loose with this nut gone, with both nuts gone, there is no longer any tension on your spring. So we're gonna come back down here, we're gonna grab the gun again. We don't need the 7/8 anymore. As you can see, it's a little different size, so I got the other socket. I'm gonna point out, let's click this on real quick. I'm gonna point out that my car, the previous owner installed aftermarket upper bolts on this. So these are 15s for me, but they should be 18s like this right here. So don't worry about that for this, but what these bolts are, and I'll show you in a minute, they are camber adjustment bolts. So that when you go to put all this stuff together, you can really quickly put a wrench on this side and like turn it back and forth to get your camber back in line. Well, right there, okay. So now we're gonna switch out sockets one more time. I left it all the way over here. Now it's time for the 8mm and I'm 18mm, and I know I'm using a chromie on a impact gun, and that's usually a no-no, but I don't care. I'm a rebel. All right, so that's done, gone and spun. So ideally, you don't want to do this one-handed, so I'm not gonna. I'm gonna set you up so that you can kind of see. All right, basically, that comes off. Right, now we're back. So now that this is all done and loose, as you can see, the whole thing jiggles. Now that cam bolt, that upper cam bolt, like I told you, it's kind of funny. And so you gotta like get it in the right place for it to want to come out. If you're doing this and you don't have those camber bolts, you're probably not gonna have this issue. But I'm having this issue because they're here. But these bottom ones pretty much just come right on out. But basically you gotta finagle the shock. There we go. And now, coilover's out. So, for you, like I said, these two bolts here should be 18mm. And then this right here should be a 7/8. I don't remember what it is in a millimeter. I think it's like a 22, maybe it's something, I guess. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyway, it's not terribly hard. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to take a few minutes because I need some of the hardware off of this. Like you saw earlier, I already have the strut bushings and stuff, but I need these bearings. So this bearing is basically going to go up here but it's going to go in between all this jazz on top of this gold piece. And then I think the polys are back here in the trunk. Yeah. All right. Poly's engaged. Okay, so these are upside down right now, but basically that bearing drops in there like that. So that way, well, if I don't lose it like I do, when you flip this over, it can rotate pretty easy. Like, so as you turn back and forth, this strut bushing will stay nice and firm inside of there like that, and then the shock will pivot on that bearing, hopefully not making any noise. But for the most part, you want to support the wheel as you come down so that you can kind of slowly release the tension on any of the springs or any of the other suspension components. You want to do what you can to keep yourself safe with this, because springs are very serious. They hold a lot of energy behind them and they can really hurt you. But basically, that's that for removal. I'm going to go ahead and do all this up and switch all my hardware around. And I'll be back to show you around about how to get it back up in there. All right. All right, everybody. So we're back together, and I basically just wanted to show you. This is the finished product. Everything gets nice and snugged back down. There shouldn't be anything up in the top. You notice I can jiggle, and it's not that bad. So there's no play. Ideally, those polyurethane bushings, they keep this gap here up here tight so that everything's nice and snug. Doesn't make any noise when you hit bumps, no rattles, might squeak a little here and there as I'm turning, but man, we're done. I just need to put the wheels on. Now, what I did was I went to the front and I generically, from the bottom of the threads on the body of the coilover, measured to the bottom of the ring, and I set the fronts at 1.5 inches from the bottom. Now, I'm expecting it to be fairly low, so I am ready to adjust up and down. The rears, I went a little higher. I went to 1 3/4 inches. I put another 1/4 inch on it over the front, because if the car is going to have an uneven sit, I want it to rake to the front. I want the front lower than the rear so that if I ever go to launch, the rear will squat and it'll squat flat, right? So as is right now, I think it'll be pretty good. I'm going to come back with a little bit of walk around once it's on the ground and I can push it out into the yard and get a little bit better of a view of it. But ideally, you just want to utilize your jack when you're trying to put this stuff back together. When you're putting it back in, you want to go in, you want to take your coilover, you want to push the top of the coilover up into here first. You do not want to try and put this nut on unless you can, unless it's easy, but it wasn't for me. The springs actually had to compress a bit for me to be able to get this up in there right. But, let's see if I can get my flash. Yeah, now we go. But basically now it's all in there, it's all snug. But you put the top up in there first, get it up in there. And then you get your bolts in here. Once your bolts are right there and are through the knuckle and the body of the coilover, you can then take the jack, slide it right up under here, go to the bottom down here underneath of there, and then you can raise the knuckle up just a little bit, which as that happens, it'll compress the springs and it'll cause this center shaft to come up like it's supposed to and allow you to do what you need to do. But I'll be back in just a second with the finished, completed look of what Jenny's gonna be. Okay, so I sat the car down and that happened. If you can tell, it's lifted. So, like I said earlier, these are $200 coilovers. I'm not really sure what I expected, but up to this point, every single $200 coilover I've ever purchased hasn't exactly become a lift kit. What's funny is that these are actually adjusted almost all the way down. And actually you can see that rake I was talking about where I set the back a little higher than the front, but like that's friggin' horrendous considering that's well over halfway down. So what's basically gonna happen is I'm gonna take all this back apart today. I'm basically gonna take the tops loose and lift the front end and then lift the back end. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull the helper springs out completely. Those are gonna go away. And then I'm just gonna see what pulling the helper springs does. It looks like it's got a solid 3 inches too high in the back and like 2.5 in the front. So I might come up a little to compensate, but this is the end of the video. If you enjoyed the coilover swap, like, comment, subscribe, do your thing. Tell me if there's anything you want to see done before, but yeah, come over to Instagram and you can see what this thing looks like once I'm done. Have a good one, everybody. So long.